Is your response to danger fight or flight? When faced with fear, and not stress fear or anxiety, but real, true, life threatening fear, the human has two general responses: to fight or to flight. To fight is to fight against that which you fear, to stand your ground, stay still, and fight against it. To flight is to flee from it, to run. I am a flight person. I loved running when I was growing up, and I still love running, and so I don't say fight or flight. I say flight or flight faster, because my choice is to flee. Are you a fight or a flight reactor? We see an amazing story in 1 Samuel chapter 7 when the Israelites are all gathered at one place, and they're gathered there to reunite themselves with God. They tell Samuel, who is the judge of the people at that time, that they are really struggling because they have been away from God for too long and they want to come back to him. So they're all meeting at Mizpah so that they can worship God. And the Philistines, their main enemy at that time, hear of it. And so they take the opportunity to attack the Israelites. So they get in droves, they run towards the Israelites, and as they are approaching the Israelites notice. And so they have two choices: fight or flight. Are they going to reach down and grab their sword and prepare for the fight, or are they going to reach down, tie their sandals, and start running, fight or flight? But they choose a secret third option: to stand still. But they don't just choose the option to stand still. You see, if their option was to stand still, that would be them just freezing up. That would be stupidity. They would die. Their option wasn't really to stand still. It was to stand still and cry out to God. They chose a secret third option to put their trust and their faith in God, the creator of the universe, and to cry out to him saying, God, will you save us? When they see the threat, they don't choose fight or flight. They say, Samuel, do not cease to cry out to the Lord for us, that he may save us from the hand of our enemy, the Philistines. And he does. Jesus was faced with a similar response. A whole lot through Jesus' ministry, he was in danger. I don't think we talk about that enough. How the Pharisees really wanted to kill him. How the Sadducees really wanted to kill him. These teachers of the law, these lawyers, all these people, the scribes, they wanted him dead because he threatened their very life. He threatened their very religion because they believed him to not be the Messiah. Many people came around the time of Jesus and before that were claiming to be messiahs and really weren't. They claimed to be this son of David who was coming to save the nation. And when they did, if they were successful to any extent, they brought people away from Judaism. Bringing people away from Judaism means that these Pharisees, they are no longer in charge of as many people. They're no longer higher than as many people. Not as many people are paying towards them or paying attention to them. And so Jesus was a threat. And so he was in danger a whole lot during his ministry, and especially towards the end of his ministry. Here's a spoiler alert if you haven't read the story of the gospel, but hopefully you have, and you know that at the end of his ministry, Jesus dies on the cross. Though that isn't the end of his ministry. That's close to the end of his ministry. The end of his ministry is him raising from the dead, showing that he has power even over death. Jesus knew when all of this was about to happen. He had all of his disciples together for what is now called the Last Supper. I don't imagine it was called the Last Supper when it was happening, because everybody would wonder, what do you mean the Last Supper? I've seen a meme where Judas says to Jesus, hey, when do you want to have the Last Supper? And Jesus says, what do you mean the Last Supper? And Jesus says, well, I mean supper, just a normal supper, everyday supper. But no, it was his Last Supper, and Jesus knew that it was his Last Supper. And he told his disciples that he was going to be betrayed. And he told his disciples what was about to happen to him. And so Jesus, the night that he was to be betrayed, had a choice. What is he going to do? Is he going to fight against the people who were coming for him? That's what Peter did. Peter cut off the ear of Malchus. And I tell you, he wasn't aiming for his ear. I think he was aiming for his head. Was he going to flee? Well, that's what a whole lot of the other followers of Jesus did when Jesus was dying on the cross as he was. They were fleeing. They were running from it. So was Jesus going to fight, or was he going to fly? And Jesus chooses this amazing third option. The story is told in Matthew chapter 22 and in Mark chapter 14, but I'm going to be in Matthew chapter 22 in the story of Jesus in Gethsemane. Then Jesus, this is in verse 36, then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And taking with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. He is sad. He is in the pits right now. We talk about highs and lows in life, peaks and valleys. He's in a valley. He's sorrowful because he knows what's about to happen to him. And what is his choice? His choice is going to be to pray. Verse 39 says, "And going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, 'My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me.'" God, if it is up to you, let this not have to happen to me. He says, "Please, I don't want to die. Let this pass from me." But, even more powerfully, he says, "Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." In the face of agony, amidst all of these agonizing events, Jesus chooses not fight, not flight. He chooses prayer. He chooses to turn to the God of the universe and ask him, "God, if it's your will, take this from me." But more powerfully, he says, "Not what I want, but what you want." Some people point to Jesus being not willing to go through with it when he asks God to take this cup from him, but that's not what we see at all. What we see is that Jesus is willing, despite the fact that he, in his human flesh, desires really to not do this. But he does it anyway. He goes through with it for our sake. He goes through with it because he loved us that much. To choose between fight or flight can sometimes not really be a choice. It's whatever we do naturally. Jesus naturally prayed. And so I want to encourage you, we, as God's children, ought to be people that when we are faced with danger and when we are amidst agony, we ought to be people who pray. When we choose between fight or flight, our first response needs to be prayer every time. Because that's what our Savior did. Our Savior prayed amidst agony. Folks, the world is in agony right now. You may not have coronavirus. You may not know anybody who's been physically affected by coronavirus. Maybe your agony is just staying in your house all day. I'm an extrovert. I love being around people. This is agony for me. But we still need to be praying for ourselves and for the world right now. The world is in agony. Our choice between fight or flight is easy because we got to choose the secret third option to pray. Are you praying during all this agony? Notice in this story, Jesus doesn't just pray once. He prays and then goes back to his disciples. They're sleeping. He goes and prays again. Comes back to his disciples. They're sleeping again. And he goes and prays again. Jesus prays over and over and over again. Are you in constant contact with our Savior? We read in Thessalonians, pray without ceasing. Does that verse describe you amidst this agony right now? I encourage you today to pray. Pray amidst agony. Choose your choice between fight or flight. Respond to this fear by turning to our God, the creator of the universe, and praying and asking that his will be done and that he may grant healing and comfort and peace during this time of agony.